Well, let's talk about a little bit about time slips, because I feel that what you were just describing when you were talking about the we state was the super presence, like the perfect eternal moment, which is the only thing that exists on the other side. But here, of course, we've got these linear time constraints. But then you talk about something called time slips. So will you tell us a little bit more about that?
So
Sure.
Ron is the one who needs to talk about this, but I want to say
Okay.
that when Ron first told me of his experience with time slip and brought it into the novel, I was in one of those moments where I said, no, there's no way this is true. I said, there's no way this is true. And then he explained what happened, and I went, holy crap, that is incredible. And so, Ron, take it away.
So do you know what Skinwalker Ranch is? It's this place where of high strangeness. It's a
Okay.
ranch in the Utah desert. The there's another new place called Bradshaw Ranch, which is outside of Sedona. Have you ever been there and gone to the vortexes and all that?
Yeah, of course.
So Bradshaw Ranch is, as the crow flies, maybe 8, 10 miles. And it's a place of real high strangeness and has been for a long time.
Hmm.
And so we identified a portal and things came out of it. Um, but and this is a good example of a time slip.
My guests today are Ron Meyer and Mark Reeder, who have written an incredible book called Jesus Had a Near-Death Experience. It's listed on Amazon as a metaphysical thriller, but it really can't be pigeonholed there because it's going to cover a lot of esoteric subjects and topics. And we are going to dive very deep today because these guys are fascinating. They marry science and spirituality. So buckle up. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Mark and Ron, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
Great
you
to
for
be here
having
with
us.
you.
I'm so happy you're here. It's not often that I hear the term near-death experience, which I work with a lot. Jesus, where he's not in somebody's near-death experience, he is having a near-death experience. So how in the heck did you come up with this, you guys?
So it goes back to early Greece, where
Okay.
the founders of pretty much everything that's Western science, philosophy, politics arose out of the Greeks. And it had to do, there was this place, secret place kind of outside of Athens, where these people like Plato would go and have an experience, which I interpreted as a near-death experience. You want to tell that story a little bit, Mark, what that is? He's the
It's,
historian.
Okay, sure.
it's known as the Eleusinian school. And um, think about it this way. Every culture or every part of the planet where people inhabit have a sort of golden age at one point, whether it's the Egyptians or the Mayans or the Greeks. The Greek golden age is about 400 BC to 300 BC, right in that area. You have Aristotle, you have Plato, you have Archimedes. These are individuals who reset the human experience through their experiences and their writings. So we took this idea, or Ron actually brought this idea to me, and we talked it back and forth about this particular school that was located just outside of Athens, known as Eleusinian School. And people would go to this school and they would have these profound experiences. Now, we're not for sure what caused the experiences, but the experiences were like a near-death experiences where people would visit the other side and they would come back with information. You might even say the information was downloaded into their heads in some way, into their brains. But they would come back with these incredible experience, incredible knowledge, which would create a new set point in human relationships to each other, to the planet, to mathematics, science, philosophy. And having those experiences whether it's in Greece or it's ancient Egypt or the Mayan civilization, which was the first civilization to create the concept of zero. These set points alter the human experience from that point on. It's a new set point. Bam. We're no longer, if we want to go back to Neolithic times, we're no longer using clubs. We're now creating bronze weapons. We're no longer
Right.
using bronze weapons. We're now using iron weapons. This is the same thing, only in this Eleusinian school, it isn't just metallurgy. It's the whole spectrum of the human experience. Philosophy, science, mathematics, covers everything. Government, everything is out of this experience that these people have.
So there's this book, I'll hold this up. It's a big fat book. You kind of see it.
Yep,
Called
definitely.
the Immortality Key. This
Mhm.
person did all the research he could on what was going on up there, and there's no real good record of exactly what went on when they got up there, but they came away transformed, spiritually transformed. And so I got this idea that it sounds to me like Jesus actually had a near-death experience. He died, came
Okay,
back, if
now
you
I
want
know
to.
where you're going with this.
And so we start out the novel with an historical piece where he actually goes and has this near-death experience and starts a new religion. One of the things Mark didn't talk about is that the founders of almost all religion have an experience, and experiences are great, but they don't scale very well. Beliefs scale, and so Christianity turned into a belief system, not one not one of experiences, although some of the early forms of Christianity did try to share the experience and create a culture around them. You want to talk to that, Mark? That's another historical thing.
Well, you're talking about like Gnosticism, for
That's
example.
right.
Uh, Gnosticism was the direct knowing of spiritual experience. And in the among the Gnostics, anybody could step up and lead a service, for example. Quakers do that today. Anybody in the Quaker religion at a meeting can stand up and speak to the membership. But the Gnostics had this sort of idea that direct experience of God was something everybody could experience, not just the priest. And there are others. I mean, Buddha is the same. Buddha has this experience, whether it's a near-death experience or whatever happened. He creates a new set point, and his personal experience, as Ron says, doesn't scale up. But Buddhism, the belief in Buddhism, scales hugely. There's nearly 1 billion people in the world that follow the tenets of Buddhism, whether it's Zen
Muhammad, the
Buddhism
same
or
thing, right?
Muhammad, very much the same thing.
So this is really fascinating to me. I've never actually directly spoken to somebody who had a lot of research and studied in this area with Jesus, but there has been speculation that I've been hearing about for a long time that he traveled from the time he was 12 to 32 to different, I'll call them mystery schools, not just in India, but also in Egypt and in other places. There's supposedly documentation of him having visited in these very sacred schools a long time ago. So is this what you're basing that first idea that he had the near-death experience, because there is some historical evidence that he was actually at that school?
Quite possibly. But also, he went into the desert and into a cave and emerged, which became the basis of the technique that the modern people that are in the book use to have their own near-death experience and get these downloads.
What do you think was the accelerant that was used for the near-death experience?
It's still, I can't swear, it's still a damn mystery. The guy wrote that big book and he could never quite figure it out.
Is there any speculation on what it is? Do they think it was like maybe some type of a psychedelic that maybe we are aware of or not aware of today?
He looked at all these possibilities and could find no firm evidence for any of them. But there was the aspect of a pilgrimage, which involves kind of a struggle to get where your goal is or your end point is. So they were probably pretty exhausted. And beyond that, it's a mystery. It was, I guess it's supposed to be a mystery. And so part of the
Exhaustion.
basis of the book is that in some ways, modern science, modern medicine could take that and create artificial near-death experiences, take them, let them almost die and then bring them back, which is what there's so many people now in the 21st century, like 5 million or so in America alone, had these kinds of experience, these situations where they were sort of medically dead but came back, but not all have report, these kind of near-death experiences in one way or another. So why not be able to induce them and get what goodies are on the other side? Like, for example, one of my teachers worked for Steve Jobs, and he had one such experience when he saw the cell phone, and he then brought it, using some smart people, made it reality. But he had a vision of it and what it could do. And there's a group of people called the Invisible College. Have you heard of that?
I have not. The Invisible College.
These are these people. Some are coming out now, but they had knowledge from downloads, and they had exceptional skills, and they're the ones that develop technology and all that. But they don't they keep themselves secret. And so we created in the book another group. I think we call it the Promethean or Prometheus,
Prometheus project.
the Prometheus Project, modeling on those people. A couple of them now have come out and said, yes, this is group and this is what my experience is. But basically, they keep secret.
And what types of things are they studying, Mark?
Well, Ron knows a little bit more about that than I do. My historical knowledge, like say for Buddhism or Christianity, goes back to the formation of these concepts and ideas. And I want to get back to your question about what could have caused Jesus to have it.
Sure, yes.
So two things are always present. Ron talked about the pilgrimage, which leads to exhaustion. And the other part is deprivation. So those two work together to put the individual in a receptive state. And then if you want to go to the Don Juan books written by Carlos Castaneda, where a drug is then used when they are in this exhausted, deprived state to enable them to reach beyond the boundaries of what we would call reality. My room, for example, is my reality. My head every second is telling me I'm living in this room. If I can get to an exhausted, deprived state where my head is no longer telling me what is going on, I can literally step outside my room and be in that other world that you discussed earlier. So those are two really important things. So you have a pilgrimage, which leads to exhaustion, because if you're spending 12 days in the desert or 40 days in the desert walking across it, in a pilgrimage, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to be deprived of food and water. When you get to that cave, as we posit in the book, Jesus had a near-death experience. If you have a mentor in that cave, a shaman or someone who is helping you, as they did with the Eleusinian schools, whether they administer a psychoactive drug or there is a more deprivation of some kind, you are going to be able to step outside the normal boundaries of what we consider to be reality and experience something that allows you to process information in a way that could be downloaded. And as Ron talked about with Stephen Jobs and the iPhone, and suddenly you're saying, oh, we could do this. And it becomes a reality because you bring it back from that other world.
Ron, earlier you were talking about how the two of you met through martial arts and you could get to a place of a flow state. Will you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm wondering if this has been a catalyst for you to kind of come into these areas because of those types of experiences.
So the flow state is usually described with a letting go process. So most of, the New Age movement was like making yourself better, the self better, improving it. But in some ways, some people argue you're already perfect the way you are. That's what people who have near-death experiences. So this is a version of that. They've let go of, when you go into the near-death experience, you've let go of all these things that are the self, and the self is gone in the normal sense. And so that can occur by letting go. And we do it through a process of meditation and just reinforcing let go, let go. And eventually everything just works out in a physical setting. You do just what's necessary. Um, I've been able to take people, and probably within 10, 20 minutes, they can get into that state. I've had people, Boulder is the center of spirituality. It's been forever. Did you know that? It's one of the
No,
great
did
centers of
not.
spirituality.
Hmm.
There's a whole school of Buddhism here. Yeah, for sure. So where was I?
You were talking about the flow state and how that could have maybe contributed to you having these experiences to get to a place where you're talking about these different ideas.
So eventually one has the ability to shift into that state if you practice it. We do it in a kind of play martial art way, because you're moving and letting go and just letting entering the flow of the river. There's many metaphors for it. You're just part of that, but there's no you. And when things happen, like Mark had this one experience where he was in the flow state, and he could have killed me. He had a thing that went right to my Adam's apple, but he stopped, luckily. So
Ah, you were that close to having a near-death experience, Ron.
I know, or a real death experience. But Mark, describe how that felt to you.
Well, when you're in the flow state, you don't have a particular emotional feeling because there's no sense of self and other. There's just the we space. As you said yourself, you're in that, when you cross over to that other space, it's we.
It's the we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened was I touched Ron's throat and I was immediately thrown out of that space. And suddenly I realized that I could have hurt him really badly. And that scared me because the we space movement, when we're in the flow state, let me say it a different way. When you're in that flow state and you're practicing it from a martial standpoint, you're not practicing from the standpoint of learning how to kill the other. You're practicing it from a standpoint of what does it mean to be in sync with somebody else. Ron, at this particular point, was not in the we space. He was playing the role of someone attacking me,
The bad guy.
the bad guy. But I didn't see him as a bad guy that I was afraid of. I just saw there's movement coming toward me and I joined with the movement. And then the moment I touched his throat, I was thrown out of that we space and I saw where I was and I was able to stop before I hurt him. But that was very scary, actually.
But how did this transform you to get to the place where you have now collaborated on a book called Jesus Had a Near-Death Experience?
We have for many years now worked on this we space. And what it has done for us is to be able to sit down and have coffee and enter the we space while we're in the coffee. And instead of Ron saying, I'll give this an example. Ron says, let's have a character do this, and me saying, oh, no, let's not have the character do that. What instead happens is Ron says, let's have the character do this. And since we're in the we space, I'm saying, that sounds like a great idea. Let's explore that completely to the very end and see where it goes. And so there's no competitiveness in the we space for who's going to be dominant in the writing process. What happens is it becomes a true collaboration. It's a collective that says, what is the best way for getting this idea out there? And at the same time, there aren't any really stupid ideas because you're working together to find out what is the best idea of everything that is thrown at you. So that's how that has worked together.
So just let me expand on one thing. So when you're training martial arts, occasionally, whether it's punching or throwing, something will happen. It's like a miracle. The person you're playing with goes flying, and it's like, wow, that was like, how did that happen? What did I do? But but then you say, I'd like to do that again. And then what came out of this is that one realizes that there was no Ron doing that or no Mark doing that. Mark and Ron disappeared, and that allowed that to happen.
But then when you would try and inflict your will on it, you couldn't make it
To
replicate.
not make it happen again.
Not at all. Not without the cooperation of the other person falling down for you. It just can't happen.
Pretending.
Or pretending, yeah. So,
Well, let's talk about a little bit about time slips, because you mentioned this in one of the areas that you talk about time slips. And I feel that what you were just describing when you were talking about the we state was the super presence, like the perfect eternal moment, which is the only thing that exists on the other side. But here, of course, we've got these linear time constraints. But then you talk about something called time slips. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
so
Sure.
Ron is the one who needs to talk about this, but I want to say
Okay.
that when Ron first told me of his experience with time slip and brought it into the novel, I was in one of those moments where I said, no, there's no way this is
You
true.
weren't in the flow.
I wasn't in the flow. I said, there's no way this is true. And then he explained what happened, and I went, holy crap, that is incredible. And so, Ron, take it away.
Okay. By the way, have you ever interviewed PMH Atwater?
No, I haven't, but I saw her speak at Ions last year.
So I'll relate this back to her because she had multiple near-death experiences.
Yes, she did.
And she's mastered time slipping.
Okay, okay.
So I'll give it. So do you know what Skinwalker Ranch is?
I think I've heard of it before, but I can't place what it is.
It's this place where of high strangeness. It's a
Okay.
ranch in the Utah desert. There's another new place called Bradshaw Ranch, which is outside of Sedona.
I am like 90 minutes from there.
Well, you're in Arizona. Have you ever been there and gone to the vortexes and all that?
Yeah, of course. All the whole reason I moved to Arizona was because of Sedona.
So Bradshaw Ranch is, as the crow flies, maybe 8-10 miles.
Okay.
And it's a place of real high strangeness and has been for a long time.
Hmm.
And so we identified a portal and things came out of it. But and this is a good example of a time slip. So we had a person who was on the ground who was our guide there. By the way, I got to be doing this through a series of synchronicities. They had boom, 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 and we were there just like we had to be. So we were supposed to meet him at this parking lot, and then you go on a gravel road and you drive to the old ranch, which is two buildings, a adobe building and another building that was the main building. And it's very famous. It was a place where it was a movie set for Westerns for a long time. Elvis Presley was there, John Wayne. So it has an interesting history. But we started and picked up this guy. I called somebody, said, what time should we be out there? And he said, be there at 6:30. We knew it took just exactly a half hour to get there. And it was a straight shot. And we picked him up and we started driving. And eventually we somehow got lost, like impossibly lost. We were like in another world. We were seeing buildings we couldn't see. We practically drove off a cliff. And we were all like, wow. And I felt different. Everybody else, there were 5 of us in this SUV, the crew, and it was just a weird experience, altered state experience. The reality wasn't quite right. And then all of a sudden, we were on the road. And this was a high-end rental. And you could see our GPS, and we were going around like spaghetti, like, what in the heck were we doing? And we arrived exactly at the time we should have, a half hour later. But we had been driving around for a half hour in this weird space. So I got an extra half hour of my life.
Oh.
So I told PMH Atwater about this experience. She said, "Oh, I know all about that. I can control that. I'm going to write a book." I was told to write a book, from whatever, from beyond. I was going to write 3 books, and now I got to write my third one, and I'll do it in a month because I can get this extra time to do it. So that's
Wow. So normal people can experience this too. I bet a lot of people that are listening can think of a time when they had a time slippage. I only have one in my life that I can really identify, that my sister and I were together, that we both said, we don't know what happened, but definitely we were there way longer than the clock said.
so yeah, I think so. We use that as one device in our novel a couple times, very purposely. So in the novel, there's this project called the Promethean. Is that right? Am I saying it right, Mark?
Prometheus.
Prometheus project, where these people they're sort of a mirror version of the invisible college I mentioned earlier. These smart people that have used this device of intentional near-death experiences to gain knowledge, and they divided it into 3 fractions. You want to describe what they are, Mark? 'Cause you like to, or should
Well,
I?
there's a spiritual faction led by a Dominican friar who wants to control or wants to make certain that the near-death experiences no longer happen.
And they want to bury, because it'd be terrible for Christianity if it were really true that Jesus had a
And
near-death experience.
right. Then you have another faction that wants to use it in terms of expanding the human experience to artificial intelligence. And then you have a third faction which wants to use it for personal gain in order to become more powerful and richer. So those are the 3 factions.
And continue the high growth of technology and as we know it right now. And so they're kind of competing for control of this process, the end process, as revealed at the end of the book, as it should. So on occasion, three of the players who represent different points of view time slip their way to Tibet, into this very sacred temple, and have these kind of time slip meetings there.
Interesting. So I heard that you're also working on a near-death experience movie. So that's a little different than the book, correct?
Yes, this is really just kind of laying out people who have diverse experiences from diverse backgrounds, looking for their commonalities and the differences and what it all means. Like we said earlier in the green room, that one of the takeaways is that you're immortal. They have no fear of death anymore. And of course, you also mentioned that they have this experience of unconditional love, that not only is that the source that loves us as we are perfect beings, but also we are that unconditional love. And I know it's a paradox, but that's what people come away with.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think here we have the experience of love. On the other side, we are love, not having an experience of it.
That's pretty much what I would say, was what most people would say, but it's hard to articulate, as you know.
It is. These experiences are so ineffable. But you also touched on a few really interesting points in your book. So not only do you share this story, but then you touch on different areas like human issues of loss and grief and self-discovery and power and influence. So tell us what you have uncovered to be one of the most common, universal human issues that we have. What do you think is number one?
Well, both you and Mark know about one. That's the loss of a loved one, and that was one of that was one of the main. It is the main impetus in some way for the two major characters in the book. So you guys can riff on that a little bit because I haven't quite experienced that myself.
So, Mark, I know you lost your wife 22 years ago, but will you tell us the story that you shared about how you knew she was the one?
Oh, so yeah, I will tell that story. I've told it a few times to people. I was living in Seattle, training at an Aikido dojo, and living with another woman at the time. And the woman also trained in Aikido. And we were standing in the dojo talking at one end of the dojo, and the front door to the dojo is at the other end of the dojo. And the dojo is a place of training. And this woman walks in. I've never seen her before in my life. She walks in, I turn and look at her, and I turn back to the woman I'm living with and go, my wife just walked in the room. And needless to say, that was not the right thing to say. That relationship did not last long after that. But from the moment Debbie and I touched, throwing each other on the mat, there was a sense of no other. We were just there. And always, whenever we were together, that was the feeling. So when she passed away 22 years ago, that was the hardest thing that ever happened to me, because it wasn't my other self or my other or something else. It was a literal part of me that was no longer there.
So I'm going to ask you a question because, we've talked about on the show before, and Ron, you mentioned it, that I have a passed away loved one on the other side. And one of the things that I wrote was that his death was not only the worst thing that happened to me, but in some ways, the best thing that happened to me, because we began combining our energy when he was on the other side and creating things that I never could have created on my own. And he's been an integral part of everything that I have done on the spiritual realm. He was my greatest spiritual teacher when he was on this earth plane. And I feel like he has been my greatest spiritual ally on the other side. So I'm curious if you have similar feelings to your loss of Debbie with the hindsight of 22 years.
My experiences with Debbie after her loss are more about her just showing up, me not actually physically seeing her, but sensing her sitting next to me, saying to me, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. And she's not talking about like a greater idea of, Mark, in 25 years, you're going to pass away. I'm going to be there to greet you. It's more like, I am a very emotional individual, and she can sit next to me and say, it's okay. Everything's going to work out. Everything will be fine. And she would do that when she was alive. She would listen to me being emotional, and she would say, it's going to be okay. And I would immediately calm down.
By the way, shortly before she passed, she told me I had to take care of Mark.
Really?
Yeah. And Ron, and in a lot of ways, Ron was the next level. So Debbie was the level of dealing strictly with emotional detritus that I would have. Ron was the next level of a spiritual development that said, okay, how do we get you to recognize that your emotions aren't an enemy, or they're just part of you, and you can use them or not use them, but they're there, and you don't have to give in to them. You don't have to become angry. You don't have to become sad. You can instead you can thank anger or sadness or happiness for being there, but at the same time, you can be more even keeled. And so Ron's worked with me for, oh gosh, I guess since Debbie passed away, it's been about 22 years.
Mm. So bringing it back to the book, there's two characters in the book. The first one is a female character about 30 years old. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah, Sarah
Who
Davenport.
experiences her father being killed right in front of her, kind of sets the stage. And of course, when that happens, you want to know why did this happen? And what does it mean? And you begin a pursuit of trying to find the answer to that. And the other main character is a professor, quite a bit older in some ways, in his 40s. Is that right?
Yeah,
He
Isaac
lost his
Johns.
wife. He lost his wife. And so he's on a similar search. What does it mean? Why did this happen? And they join up in some way on this quest that leads to, an extraordinary ending, we hope, in the book that people want to learn about. So, we're kind of using this theme of loss to propel the story forward, at least in one way.
So I don't think writing a book about Jesus having a near-death experience, you can escape trying to learn a little bit more about who you think Jesus was. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you think he was a real person?
I do.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I believe that. So my historical research, what's interesting is that in the first 2 centuries after Christ's death on the cross, there is no mention of him actually being the Son of God. That
In
is
the first two, say that how
first
long?
2 centuries. The
So
first
200 years. So the first
200
200 years after his
Yeah.
death, there's no mention of him being the
Being-
Son of God.
he's a prophet. His apostles have remarkable powers. They have apostolic powers like the gift of tongues, miracles. He himself could produce miracles. This is but there's not an idea that he is sent from God down to this earth. That's a 5th century. Uh, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church in the 5th century said, "Oh, let's have a meeting." And at
Is
this
this the
meeting,
Council of Nicaea?
yes, well, at
Okay.
this meeting, we're going to decide what in the Bible it talks about Christ, and there's lots of different words that are used, and they can be all defined differently. So one of the ways is that he's the Son of Man. Another one is that he's the Son of God. So they have a decision. They have a vote. Now, 2 of the bishops at the Council of Nicaea say, no, he's not a God. He's not the Son of God. He's a man. But 55 of the people there said, oh, no, we're going to make him the Son of God. So that's when he becomes this larger than life character, uh, godlike character, larger than life godlike character. Before that, he's just an incredible philosopher, an incredible apostolic character who can produce miracles. And he does.
It's also the beginning of the belief system that they can scale up.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because belief is different than experience.
And then, at that point, the Catholic Church goes, well, we've got the Nestorians, we got to get rid of them. We got the Gnostics, we got to get rid of them. We got all these Christian sects that don't agree with us. So I like to go back to the Jesus of 32 BC or 32 AD, and here's an individual with a philosophy that's an incredible philosophy. And where did that philosophy come from? It's totally different than the Old Testament.
Oh, yeah.
And
The
the
fear of wrath
eye
and
for
all
an
of
eye,
that.
tooth for a tooth,
Yes.
smite the enemies. Let's go down and let's we're out of Egypt. Let's go down into the promised land. We'll kill everybody there, and that'll become our new home. No, it's not like that. It's literally, people think turn the other cheek is about being submissive. It's not. It's about being forgiving. And that's a totally different philosophy. I love
Right.
that idea of it.
So in our book, we have a conflicted Gnostic warrior, and he has to figure out what's going on. So in our book, these people that mirror the invisible college, they're old enough now that they've had children, and those children have led extraordinary lives as they were growing up, which is the case with the invisible college. And this is one of them that does not like his heritage, and he's looking for some other alternative, and he finds it in Gnosticism. But he's also in the grip of the group of people who are the Christians, and so he has an interesting kind of conflict internally that he has to resolve as the book moves forward.
So do you think that when this is thrown around, this term is thrown around a lot in spirituality, do you think that Jesus was what they call an ascended master?
Ooh, I've never heard that term before, but I love it. I
Really?
mean, I've
Oh
heard the
my
term
gosh.
I'm sorry, I've heard the term ascended master, but I've never heard it applied to Jesus. I love it
Oh, yes, very
because
much so.
that makes total sense. That he has this experience, whether it's a near-death experience or something else, that changes who he is as an individual. And he becomes, now he's no longer the son of a carpenter. He's no longer a pilgrim going to all these different religious schools or religious places or spiritual places. He has now become an individual who is saying, here is a new way of looking at life.
So do either of you have any feelings one way or the other of whether it was true that he actually died on the cross or did not?
I, I think that's one of those answers that no matter what you do, people are going to hate you. But anyway, there's a lot of evidence to show that there's evidence to, not a lot, there's evidence to show that he actually did not die on the cross.
Mhm.
Because he was not crucified the way normal crucifixions are, which would cause the lungs to no longer be able to take in air. So when you're crucified, you actually suffocate. So there is some evidence that he was actually somewhat supported so he could breathe. And then he's taken down from the cross, put in the cave. So there's that. The other part is more phenomenal, that he actually dies on the cross, he's put in the cave, and then 3 days later he is risen. Also could be explained through a sort of mass hallucination. There were a couple of 19th century French psychiatrists that came up with the idea that mass hallucinations can infect an entire population of individuals and give them a collective memory of something that actually never happened.
I have not heard that before.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting phenomenon. Um, all of these could be used to explain what happened. I like to think that Jesus was an individual, he died on the cross, and that it wasn't a mass hallucination that had, but like my wife Debbie, Jesus came back and talked to these people, talked to his apostles. He said, listen, guys, it's not as bad as you think. And that's what I like to think happened.
Ron, your thoughts?
I'm not sure what I want to say about it. In the book, it's not the dying on the cross, that's the transformational experience. It's an earlier one when he goes into the desert and realizes the eternal truth that he is one with God. He and God are the same. So we really in the book don't deal with his ultimate death, in terms of his body, but that he went through something like a near-death experience in advance of that, that allowed him to do whatever he had to do, the miracles and that sort of stuff. So this is a preceding event to that.
Mhm.
You agree, Mark?
Yeah, and I think that's important, that we can talk about Christ dying on the cross or not dying on the cross, but the importance, at least in the novel, is not that crucifixion. It is that he gained this incredible insight, these incredible powers through a near-death experience, which people nowadays have. And let's face it, in the 21st century, our ability to gather information is a million times fold what it was 2,000 years ago. So 5 million people in the United States that we know of have had an NDE, and they are bringing back what they learned from this other side. So it is no longer a single individual. It's no longer a Christ. It's no longer a Buddha. It's no longer a Muhammad or a Francis of Assisi, for example, who have a transformative experience that people can go, oh wow, this must mean he is the Son of God, or he is a special person. What Ron said earlier, we're all special people, and the fact that so many people nowadays have been transformed by these NDEs, that they can come back and they can say, look, it's love on the other side. It's not, and it's a normal thing now for people to be able to do this. It's not,
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a lot more mainstream, that's for
yeah,
sure.
which is
And
great, because now we can say, you don't have to be a God character to have an experience which changes and transforms your life into something fantastic.
so one of the things that was characterized for me when I was doing the movie on near-death experiences is that there's some agreement, growing agreement, that there are mystical experiences, and that near-death experiences is a form of mystical experience, because there's no indication that Muhammad had a near-death experience. He had a profound mystical experience, which takes you to the same place. So you don't have to die. And when we move into the altered state flow experience, we kind of have a small one, because the self disappears and things are just the way they are. The flow of everything is one, and you're one with that, but there's no you to really be one with.
Right. It's so hard in our human minds to really grasp these concepts because they are not human concepts. There's nothing human about these types of experiences.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking about the general near-death experience, because there are plenty of human aspects: heaven, a tree, a flower, a person, an angel. But when we're talking about these consciousness experiences, I think the reason that they're so hard for people to explain or to bring back or to hold on to is because there's just nothing like it that you can identify with, that you can connect to stay in that place or to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example from our flow practice. So
From your
Mark
which practice? From your which practice?
from our flow
Oh,
practice.
flow practice.
Flow
Okay,
of
yes.
playing. So in martial arts, there's different theories of what makes you strong, what allows you to throw a good punch, whatever, be stable. And Mark had trained for a long time with a guy who's a master of a certain kind of thing where you connect in a very specific way to the ground and anchor yourself. And it's powerful in its own way. But probably the least anchored kind of thing you could do is to rock back on your heels with your toes pointing up. Can you imagine how unstable you'd be? So when Mark and other people, myself included, would get into the flow state, people would try and push us over and they couldn't move us. Right, Mark?
Yeah, it's an interesting experience.
Could you actually physically feel them pushing on you?
Yes, but you don't feel it as You don't feel it as a muscular rush at you and somebody
It's got
like
to be an
trying
energy
to
exchange, isn't
move a
it?
car. Instead, it's like it's not there. It's there, but it's not there.
It's undescribable again in a certain way.
Yeah. You use
It's
the term
impossible.
yeah, Laura, you used the term ineffable, which
Yeah.
is a fantastic term because what we've been talking about, whether it's a near-death experience or a mystical experience or a paranormal experience, it's an individual experience. And we can come back and talk in a generalized tone of love in the other space and we're not afraid of death anymore if we're doing an NDE. But the fact of the matter is it is directed personally. When we can get a group of individuals collectively together, we can find some threads that are constant for that, like love, which is fantastic. But individually, that experience, my experience with my wife, Debbie, your experience with your husband, we can share that that's profound, but your experiences are going to be different than mine. But what we both share, which is really important and is the real key to all of this, is that it's real and that the love there is absolutely real. The rest is just window dressing.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, this has been such an interesting conversation. And I would imagine that there are people who have been tuning in, who have listened and are like, I want to know a little bit more about these guys. So tell everybody, I'll start with you, Mark, where they can find you.
Well, I'm on Amazon. My books are on Amazon. Mark Reeder. There's another Mark Reeder also on Amazon, but he does not look like this.
Okay.
And so there's that. I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I train at the Boulder Aikikai, which is a dojo here, and train there 3 days a week. So they can come and visit me there.
We
Nice.
share a Facebook page called the Bigfoot Chronicles.
Okay. Love the name.
You know, I got so much media material out there. I did a movie called before COVID called The Bigfoot Alien Connection Reveal.
Okay.
And right now it's got 4.7 million views on Amazon, equal
Holy
numbers,
cow. Congratulations.
equal numbers on Tubi and Amazon.
What do you think? Okay, so this is I got it. What is the draw? Why are people watching this?
Well, it was the first real public attempt by a professional film in some way that said all these unusual experiences that people have, that there's a commonality to them.
You mean the Bigfoot experience is like a sighting?
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, that shouldn't happen. If you have a UFO experience, if you have a precog experience, if you have an out of body experience, I've had multiple out of body experiences. So that there's some commonality to it. And if you have these, it's okay to have them. Don't be afraid to tell people. And it was so comforting for people. I think that's what was transformational. But nobody had ever done that before in a forum like that. You know,
Interesting.
and as I
Well,
said, that was pre-COVID.
and then you also have, so you have some movies. Where do people find your movies?
They're on all the streaming platforms.
So Netflix, Prime, those types of things.
Tubi, Pluto. There's so many. They're you know, there's a huge competition going on in a battle now with the new streaming platforms. When I got going, you know, as a film company, it was the cable revolution. So that's where I was a player. And I've done feature films and all sorts of series and stuff like that. I have a weird specialty, serial killers.
You have a weird what?
Specialty, serial killers.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I loved having this conversation. I learned some things I didn't know before. I think the mystery schools are probably one of the most intriguing things, and how much information there is that is starting to come out that people can connect with. And I think these things absolutely are conversation starters, and this is what starts to wake up the collective. So I want to thank each of you so much for your part in what you are doing to wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
Well, thank you so much. It was very enjoyable talking with you.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Yeah, and thank you. Of course, this show is absolutely nothing without all of you that tune in to watch, to comment, to subscribe. I thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.